Hello, I'm Toycat and welcome back to my second channel geography video. So today I want to talk about the fact that I'm moving to New York in May. Or to be more precise, I'm temporarily going to be in the New York City area. It's actually going to be outside of the state of New York because did you know New York is both a state and a city? Wow, educational YouTube videos. They teach you new things every day. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously everyone knows New York is a city so nice they named it twice. Although it could be a state so nice they named it twice. But the interesting thing about New York is not just its name, but also its shape. I mean, you probably don't stop to think about this. Most people shouldn't, but look at the shape of New York and how it's a very bizarre one. Even when you look at where most of the land area is up here, it's already a very strange shape because of the border with Canada and the lakes that define the land area. But it gets even weirder when you go to the south and you look at where New York City is and indeed Long Island. Look at Long Island and realize that it's kind of weird that all belongs to New York, especially when you realize that this piece of land is much closer to Connecticut. In fact, Long Island is so bizarrely shaped that New York has land borders not only with Pennsylvania and Vermont and Massachusetts and Connecticut and New Jersey like you might expect, but it also has a border with Rhode Island. Isn't that interesting? I think that's interesting. So yeah, New York is a very bizarrely shaped state, but this goes even deeper when you start to dive into New York City. New York is America's biggest city, or New York is the United States of America's most populated city, to use precise words that won't cause weird words in the comments, and you probably know it for things like the Empire State Building or the Statue of Liberty and the place where there used to be some World Trade Centers. You know, there's the 9/11 Memorial Museum. You know about these things as being very New York, but what if I told you all of these things were barely in New York? So for instance, let's take what's more New York than 9/11? What defines their history more than this? If we measure the distance from the 9/11 site to another state, New Jersey, it is just 900 meters, or 2,961.87 feet. Wow. Yeah, that's a really convenient measurement. I love feet as a measurement. Yeah, Imperial's so good, am I right? You know, just let's antagonize all the Americans. Sure, what a great idea. Anyway, so as you can see, you're just 900 meters from where 9/11 literally happened. These fountains represent where the towers were and where New Jersey is. Let's take, but that's an unfair example. Let's take the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty is here, and the furthest away you can be on Liberty Island, which I think is a funny name, the furthest away you can be is about 100 meters from the sea. 200 meters from here. But basically, it's very hard to get far away from New Jersey because did you know, even though this is a New York, again, if you look very closely, you'll see this is New York, but all of the sea around the island belongs to New Jersey. The Statue of Liberty might be technically New York, but it's a very integrated city when it comes to New Jersey. Even more interestingly to me is if you look at Ellis Island, you'll start to see this, and it's like, New York owns part of this island, but not even most of it, and then they don't own the sea around that as well. What is the scoop with this? And I want to explain at least partially all of that in today's video, but I want to talk more about, again, because I've been looking into living in the New York area that isn't New York, I want to talk about the weird thing that is city and state lines. So, and by the way, just to clarify, temporarily, these are something you don't need to know in this video. You don't want to know in this video, let's be honest. You want to know about weird things like, hey, this is New York, this is Manhattan, and this is also New York, this is Brooklyn. It is a outer borough, as you might call it, and the Bronx over here. Is it easy to click on that? Let's just type in the Bronx. The Bronx is also a part of New York City. All of this area up here, but even the more interesting thing to me than Queens and the Bronx and Brooklyn is the fact that this island right here, you know how that's the Statue of Liberty inside New Jersey territory? The New York, New Jersey border kind of bends to specifically make Staten Island a part of New York. This is really bizarre, and there's so many tales about why this happened. A lot of those tales are fake, like, oh, there was a boat race and he circumnavigated the island and blah, 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 blah. But basically, the point is that, yeah, this is a part of New York, despite clearly being geographically closer to New Jersey. In fact, if we go back to that previous example from earlier, the place where you're just 900 meters from New Jersey, Jersey City, if we do some random searching, or let's use Hoboken as a better example. I know a lot of people in New York like to make fun of Hoboken. I don't Hoboken, I'm saying it wrong. Wow, look at me being an outsider, make fun of me, people from New York. I deserve it because I can't say the place right. But as you can see, if you want to get from there to, again, let's always use the 9/11 place as our example. You're just 15 minutes away by a direct train, whereas if you want to go from Staten Island, again, you're a 51 minute, an hour and 9 minutes of bus. If we go from even the most generous point, 38 minutes away, more than 3 times as far. And this is, you know, there are much less generous points you can make. Wow, an hour 31 bus. I'm even impressed there is a direct bus at all. And as you can see, you have to cross not just one bridge, but you cross a bridge here, you cross a partial bridge here, let's not count that, and then a massive bridge over here. So it's really bizarre. What's the deal? Why, is this? And the simple answer is, yeah, state jurisdiction leads to a really weird thing where this is New York City, this right here is a part of the city itself, whereas, like this over here, well, this is something way different. And also, once you go up north, it also isn't. The cities in America seem to have much more territorial control over things. And to prove that point, it's not just like, oh yeah, this is part of New Jersey. Their governor is someone else. And also, they pay New Jersey property tax rates. But it's, and there's a lot of interesting reasons you wouldn't want to live in New Jersey versus New York, although they also have very high various tax rates, so you probably shouldn't try to live in either if you've got money and the ability to choose somewhere to live. But the interesting thing about this being New Jersey and this being New York is the fact that, like, it extends to a lot of different bizarre places. So let's take, for example, the transport, which is, by the way, dealt with by the Port Authority of, the Port Authority of both New York and Jersey. Basically, all of the trains that, the subway is one of the most famous forms of transport in the world. Wow. Doesn't this bring something to your head? Does it not? Okay. The subway is interesting to people that like subways, and wow, isn't this map of it interesting? Oh yeah, it's such a good map. Coming from London, by the way, okay, maybe I'm just going to offend New Yorkers with this video. That's what I'm here to do. I look at this, isn't this a much better map? Like, you can see where you're going a lot better than, like, this mess. I find it so hard to, like, the color coding is nice, but also they go from such bizarre places to such, like, it's hard to really get a feel for, like, all those different lines. Also, it's geographically accurate to a fault. Look how crowded Manhattan is. And then look around out here. But here's the interesting thing, right? So, the Staten Island Railroad is a part of the New York subway system, even though it's entirely disconnected from the rest. Even though, if we look at a map of, for instance, the path, you can see that the path actually connects to the New York subway in quite a few points, but because they're entirely differently funded by different city operators from different states, it leads to the very, very bizarre situation where if the path goes down because they're building, I don't know if you even call it the path. Basically, if that system goes down, this combination of New York and New Jersey, well, they'll give you a bus service rather than putting you onto the subway for New York because, like, well, that's the subway. That's an entirely different system, and it's really, really bizarre. If you ask me, the fact that, like, yeah, so the New York-New Jersey divide kind of comes down to just, like, yeah, it's been like that way for a long time, even though the reality is that, again, it doesn't take a genius to look at this map and be like, oh, you're one stop away if you live in Exchange Place from the World Trade Center. If you live in Hoboken, you're one stop away from Christopher Street, which I can only assume is an important street. I really need some water. Like, I've never been so desperate for water in the middle of a video that I think my voice will die if I don't. Anyway, so here's the interesting thing. If you look at this, you can see that New Jersey is clearly, Pavonia, Newport is one stop away from Christopher Street as well. A lot of parts of New Jersey, even if you live as far out as Harrison or Newark, or, as far as that, like, you can get direct trains into New York, whereas that's not true from certain parts of New York. And this raises the very clear and very obvious question. Also, even more interesting than that is the fact that, like, oh yeah, as soon as it crosses state lines, as soon as it becomes a cross-state boundary thing, they change the branding entirely. If we look at the subway over here in, Tompkinsville, it's going to look like a New York subway. Let's show you, in fact. I love going into random buildings. This isn't going to be the subway. Oh, it is the subway. So, even though it's outside, it's got subway branding. It's part of the subway system officially. Whereas, as soon as you go onto the path, again, like a entirely different system, they're like, yeah, that's New Jersey's mess. It's got the same trains, but it's entirely distinct, and it's not the same system. And maybe that makes some sense. But again, being used to being in London, where villages like Chesham, actually, Chesham is a market town and civil parish in Buckinghamshire, England, outside of London. Despite being outside of London, Chesham, I was looking at Buckingham. I was going to make some grand point about Buckinghamshire being named around Buckingham. We're not going to do that. But as you can see, when you look at Chesham, it has an underground station with the underground over, it's a part of the London Underground, as I'm hoping it'll say somewhere around here. Does it say London Underground anywhere? you know what, the point is, it is a part of the London Underground, even though it's outside of London, because the service extends past boundaries. Maybe it shouldn't extend past boundaries, maybe this is the better system, but I just think it's a really interesting thing that we can go over time and time again. This is not a part of New York, and this is. This is a part of the subway, and this is not. And even more interestingly, to me, is this Ellis Island situation. So what's the deal with this? Why is this a part of New York, and then this isn't? Why is there a, Ellis Island, one of the most famous New York points of entry, because people come here. Why is that inside, partially inside of New York, partially out? If, because clearly the reason that Liberty Island, the reason the Statue of Liberty is in New York, is because they made a special deal to make sure that it was. Makes sense, sure. The river boundary that's halfway between the two, it makes sense why they share that to some extent, and then it makes sense why they'd carve out a little exception for New York. But then how did this happen? Why would they carve out part of the island for New York? And the answer is land reclamation. Yeah, it's exciting. You want to talk about land reclamation? We're ready to go. So, as you can see, if we read up on the history of Ellis Island on the History Channel, which, I was very cautious to accept this, but this is correct, and I just like their logo, okay? But in 1998, the US Supreme Court rules that New Jersey has authority over the south side of Ellis Island, or the section composed of landfill added since the 1850s. When New York expanded the island from its original 3.5 acres, they were expanding into New Jersey, which means that it's not their jurisdiction. And realistically, what difference does it make here? Right? But yeah, the only way to access this island via land is via the Ellis Island Bridge, which connects New Jersey to an island that's also New Jersey, and then a part of that island in New Jersey, which is very impossible to distinguish. Like, it goes halfway through the car park. This car right here, or this van, this lorry, whatever this is, this truck, I guess, if I'm being American, this truck over here. I love the truck with the EcoBoost. This truck over here, see, I'm practicing my American. It's halfway in New York, halfway in New Jersey. They have no clue. They don't really care. Same with over here. This truck, I'm pretty sure, halfway between New York and New Jersey. Should someone tell them about that someday? Someone should. But more importantly than any of that, is the fact that, like, I keep coming back to this because it really is one of those shocks that, like, you know what? New York as a city is kind of a scam. I think cities in America are always a little bit of a scam. And, this is a very bold claim to make. I mean, if we click on a random place around it, actually, wait, let's go to West New York, which I think is a fun name for a city, and look at the city boundaries. Damn it, I picked the one city that makes some sense, didn't I? Like, it's actually pretty square. It's pretty reasonably shaped. But if you look at cities around America, so if we go to, for instance, Denver, which is in Colorado. I love Denver. I wanted to live in Denver, but there's no UK consulate in Denver anymore. Wow, my life is sad. If you look at the city shape of Denver, you can see not only an exclave where Glendale decided to opt out from being in Denver, but basically people choose whether they want to be in cities or not based on the benefits and the downsides, which sounds really great on an individual level, but it's really bizarre when you do it on a per area level. So, like, as you can see, this little community right here, part of Denver. The Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Park, I mean, obviously isn't a part of Denver. But then even more interestingly is the fact that the airport is a part of Denver because again, like, the area around it, these small towns and cities couldn't deal with a giant airport. It's Denver's airport, so they made sure that not only is it a part of Denver, but also a pathway between the airport and Denver is made. And so in America, in the UK, for instance, even if we go to Germany, that's a big city. Let's click on Berlin. Where does Berlin start and end? Here we can see it's at least some continuous boundaries. Like, at some point the rulings were made, but there's not clear exceptions where it should have been somewhere and shouldn't have not, right? If we click on a city like Belgium, wait, Belgium is my favorite city. But if we click on a city like Brussels, you had to prove my point wrong. Damn, what is wrong with Brussels? This is why you test your examples ahead of time. If we click on a city like Amsterdam, as you can see, it's a city that looks very bizarre because of the canals, but actually makes a lot of sense. Again, like, it expands in a rough area. The ending points of cities. If you click on any UK city, the official start and end point is, like, really hard to find. You just don't get borders in Ipswich. If you want to go to Buckingham, and you don't, by the way, no one wants to go to Buckingham. If you want to go to Buckingham, where does it start and end? We don't know. It just covers an area that's, like, pretty contiguous, right? Like you're either in Buckingham or you're not. The official lines, and they're not drawn geographically. They're kind of drawn by influence to some extent. And this doesn't follow how New York as a city works. If we click on New York City, you can see this is its shape. For some bizarre reason, again, Lawrence, not a part of New York. Staten Island, an island that is closer to New Jersey and surrounded by New Jersey in most of its size, is a part of New York too. And again, the reason comes to history and the reason comes to politics. The people of Staten Island are voting on the same mayor that the people of the Bronx and Queens are, and it's one of the things people like to mock people for is like, yeah, those Staten Islanders are so different because Staten Island is just a giant suburb, whereas New York is a city. They combined a city as well as some like sub-city, sub-suburbs. Some like you got like a lot of deep city with some medium-ish suburbs with just a suburb island that is entirely disconnected except from this one bridge to Brooklyn over here, as well as these 2 bridges to New Jersey and this 3rd bridge to New Jersey, and no doubt countless other links. But basically, this island is just added in to the New York mix, and it leads to some weird things. So here is the 1997 New York City mayoral election. Wow, isn't that interesting? Here's the 2001. As you can see, for this island, no matter who wins in the end, even when you go to recently where New York is just a Democratic stronghold, 66% of the vote for Bill de Blasio and 27% of the vote for Nicole Maliotakis, Maliotakis, my favorite snack. As you can see, big win, 70 to 80% in the Staten Island versus big wins for de Blasio elsewhere, because you know what? Look at them. You can even see on this map behind me right here, you can even see just how hilariously separated Staten Island is from the rest. And in fact, if you take this map from 2017 or this map from 2013, it's the same rough point, right? Like, you know what? Staten Island votes one way, rest of the city votes another. We can raise this point all we like. But if we compare it to, for instance, New Jersey in 2013 as well, you can see like, that part, like the parts of New Jersey that are closest to New York are the blue bits. Wow, those match up much better, don't they? Whereas the parts of New Jersey that are red also happen to be, the deepest red are the parts that happen to line up with the few parts of New York City in the south that are also red. It's almost like they politically, link better into New Jersey, physically link better into New Jersey. Also, like, proximity, not only in terms of like connections, but like, in all the different senses, it's like a part of, New Jersey, but it just isn't. And that's one of those bizarre things where I'd love to be like, and that's why it should be. But also, America is a country that is made from its 50 states, and ultimately those 50 states have a lot of bizarre points where they start and end. I mean, look at New York State right here. Look at New Jersey. Why is it that this side of the Hudson River is New Jersey? Again, West New York, it's fun to point out. West New York is outside of New York State, but then all of this part of the river is in New Jersey, even though a lot of it, the North Bergens of the world, a lot of these places clearly feel more connected to New York. They are much more culturally, economically, culturally, even transport-wise, because of the path trains. They're all better connected that way to New York. And then at some point it's just like, and then the other side of the Hudson becomes New York again. And then you get this really bizarre border where it's like, yep, this is New York State. This is New Jersey State. This little village right here, with this Wendy's is in New York. This Starbucks is in New Jersey. And ultimately, it makes you remember that, like, in America, America is a place made of 50 states, and sometimes they lead to bizarre situations like this. The states do have a fair amount of competitiveness and fighting, and maybe you could argue, the weirdness of the disputes between New York and New Jersey. You could argue that they have downsides for everyone, but if every state is trying their best to make stuff like this happen, maybe it's ultimately good. I mean, clearly, New York State is bizarrely shaped and shouldn't be shaped that way. If you were drawing the states today, you would draw them differently. In fact, you ever looked at a map of America and been like, you know what? Yeah, America looks like a country where you start on the West Coast. They're drawing states, and they're like, okay, we're gonna draw 50 of these. They make some nice little boxes. They try to take accounts for geographic concerns sometimes. And then they got to the east, and they're like, oh god, we're running out of space. I've stopped. I've ran out of ideas. You know what if this state was like a weird triangle, and halfway through the city we made it New Jersey? And it's like, yes, you're a genius. And anyway, with that said, my point here. New York's weird, but I'm going there. This whole video is just me being like, hey, going to New York. If you watch this whole video and you like talking about geography and you live in New York, and statistically some great number of people should. 3% of the American population's in New York, which is actually sounds so low because it's actually slightly less than 3%. But what's interesting to me is the fact that, like, despite having just 3% of the USA's population, New York's GDP is 1.57 trillion. I mean, that's a big number, but like, what is 1.57 trillions? Isn't a large number of trillions, you know? It's just 1.5 trillions. So if we go to the worldometer largest GDPs, you can see that, like, okay, the US has a bigger economy than New York City. That's interesting. But if you scroll down the list, you'll find out that Russia and New York City have hilariously close GDPs, despite New York City being... Let me show you the size of this. And by the way, this is New York City, the official area, not the culturally, economically connected area. But this is New York City, and just for comparison, this is Russia. So this is Russia, and the total value of goods, services sold and produced in this area are the same as the goods and services sold and produced in this area. Isn't that fascinating? I think it is. Anyway, with that said, yeah, if you live in New York, as some of you should, send me an email at ibx2cat@gmail.com and tell me about some things I'd be interested in. That's what I want to hear. Tell me about weird things that are like, yeah, if you're you, because I am me, you'd enjoy this. And tell me where in the New York area you are, because you're not. If you live in like Queens and you're like, yeah, there's this great thing in Jackson Heights. No, get out of here. I'm somewhere over there. You know, I'm in Newark, or East Orange, or West Orange. You know, I could be in West Orange. You don't know me, or Union, or Elizabeth. You know, New Jersey is filled with such British place names. I could spend all day going over that, and I have spent all day going over that. But yeah, tell me where you're at and some interesting things that you think I'd like as a geography / whatever this channel even is at this point, nerd. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you all enjoyed, because I'll see you all next time. Why is the Trump Tower a monument? Should we go look? Let's go enjoy this monument. Wow, I enjoy this Trump Tower. That's not a Trump Tower. Whoa, this is a weird building, though. What the heck is this? How do they... Is that okay? Oh, it's like the... I thought the whole building went out a bit. It's interesting, though. Man, it's so weird to, like, nuke around New York City. Like, it's such a stereotype of a city, right? Yeah, let's just look around this for a while, shall we? Ooh, isn't this interesting? Metropolitan. Antiques and fine jewelry. Ooh, what about this? 81. Man, that is a weird-shaped building. Man, New York is, like, so intense. It's actually, you know... This video just goes on because this is chill time with Toy Cat at the end of the videos. Everyone's clicked off. The engagement rates are down. It's just the true ones left now. So while we're here, chat. New York City was the only city in the world, because I loved cities. New York City was the city that broke me. It's so intense. Nowhere else in the world do you walk in a straight line for an hour and you see skyscrapers the whole time. Like every city has a skyscraper district. Like like a lot of cities deliberately limit those skyscraper districts. And although New York has some limits on how you can do skyscrapers, obviously they're not successful enough. And also Pret exists in New York. Isn't that interesting? You know what? I'm just gonna go to Pret a Manger every day. That'll teach people. They do the unlimited coffee pass in New York too. That's interesting. Or is it wait, I clicked on it. Tell me more about it. When I click it, it means I want to hear about what you're doing there. Okay, well, I guess I shall not get unlimited coffee. But what I will get instead... Oh, there we go. That's so interesting that they're doing this in America too, huh? For $9.99. That's pretty good. Or you get espresso, cold brew, and other drips and drinks. That's pretty decent. $9.99 for unlimited coffee, huh? Anyway, with that said, thank you for watching this video. I don't know why anyone watches this channel. It's objectively terrible. But if you do watch it and you live in New York, email me at ibx2cat@gmail.com. Unless you don't want to. In which case, don't do that. Goodbye.